Hi there. You're here because you want to get smart fast.
No fluff, just the important stuff.
Exactly. So let's get right into it. Today, we're diving into a financial crime tactic called structuring.
Or sometimes known as smurfing.
Right, smurfing.
And basically think of structuring as a way for criminals to handle large amounts of illegal money.
How do they handle it?
Well, they try to sneak it into the legitimate financial system without setting off any alarm bells. It's really about staying under the radar.
Okay, keeping it quiet. And for this deep dive, our insights are coming from a really helpful article over at FinCrime Intelligence.
It's quite detailed.
It is. And our mission here is to really unpack structuring from all sides. We want you to understand what it actually is, how these criminals carry it out,
The tactics they use.
yes, the tactics, and why it's such a problem, and importantly, how financial institutions actually try to catch it.
So we'll look at the common techniques, the red flags banks watch for,
Uh-huh. The legal consequences if you get caught.
and kind of where it fits in the whole money laundering picture.
Perfect. So let's start with the basics again. Structuring at its core.
It's taking that big pile of illicit cash, maybe from drug sales or fraud, whatever,
Right.
and breaking it down, splitting it into lots of smaller transactions.
And the whole point is,
The main goal is always to avoid those reporting thresholds, the limits that banks and other places have to report certain transactions to the government.
it's like trying to move a ton of bricks without anyone noticing, right? You can't just drive a big truck down the main street.
Exactly. You maybe move them bit by bit, lots of small trips, hoping nobody connects the dots.
So in the US, for instance, that threshold is generally $10,000 for cash transactions, correct?
That's the common one, yes. Banks have to report cash transactions over $10,000. Structuring is all about making sure each individual deposit or withdrawal stays under that amount, say $9,900.
And it's crucial to understand this isn't just about hiding where the money came from, the actual act of structuring. That's illegal itself in many countries.
Absolutely. Even if the money itself was somehow technically legal, deliberately structuring transactions to avoid reporting is a crime.
So how do they actually do it? What are the common techniques?
Well, the most straightforward way, like we said, is just dividing a large sum into smaller chunks.
So instead of one big $25,000 deposit,
Right, maybe they make 5 deposits of, say, $5,000, or maybe slightly less, like $4,900, to seem less obvious.
okay.
And they might do this over different days or even at different branches of the same bank.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Spreading it out. And that's where the smurfing name really fits, isn't it?
Exactly. Because often, the people actually making these small deposits aren't the main criminals.
They get other people involved.
Yes, they recruit others, the Smurfs, to make these transactions for them across multiple accounts, different bank branches, sometimes even different banks entirely.
Wow, okay. That makes it much harder to track.
Much harder for law enforcement to piece it all together. The FinCrime Intelligence article mentions the timing aspect too, spreading transactions over days or weeks.
Why? To avoid automated systems.
Precisely. Banks have systems designed to flag rapid suspicious activity. So spreading it out helps bypass those initial checks.
That's quite calculated.
Oh, it is. It's not just about the amounts. It's careful planning of timing, locations, amounts. The article also points out other methods, like using multiple bank accounts almost like funnels.
Funneling the small amounts into one place eventually.
Or switching between cash and, say, money orders. And sometimes they try to find and exploit loopholes in the bank's customer identification rules, the KYC, know your customer rules.
It all seems geared towards this idea of layering the money, right? The article mentions that.
Yes, exactly. Layering. That's the key phase in money laundering that structuring often enables. All these techniques, the small deposits, the smurfs, the timing, they're designed to create layers of transactions.
To make the dirty money look clean.
Essentially, yes. To obscure its origin, make it look legitimate. It creates distance and complexity, making it incredibly tough for investigators to follow the money back to the original crime.
Which is why the banks have to be so vigilant.
Absolutely. Financial institutions are legally required to monitor for these kinds of suspicious patterns. The article digs into some of the key red flags they look for.
Okay, so what sort of things trigger warnings? What are these red flags?
Well, the classic one we mentioned is frequent cash deposits just under that reporting threshold.
That $9,900 figure again.
Exactly. If an account constantly sees deposits of, say, $9,500, $9,800, $900, that's a huge red flag for structuring.
Makes sense. What else?
Multiple different people making deposits into the same account, especially if those deposits are these smaller structured amounts.
Okay.
Also, strange geographical activity. Someone usually banks in one city, but suddenly there are lots of small cash deposits happening in a completely different state or country with no good explanation.
Right. Unexplained pattern.
Uh-huh. Or just a sudden sharp increase in how often transactions happen in an account, or the total volume of money moving through it, again, without a clear reason. These anomalies are big indicators.
And it's not just relying on a bank teller noticing something odd anymore, is it? Technology plays a huge part now.
Oh, massively. The article really stresses the role of transaction monitoring systems. These are sophisticated software platforms constantly crunching huge amounts of data.
Looking for those patterns we just talked about.
Exactly. And when the system flags something suspicious, it can lead to the bank filing a suspicious activity report, a SAR.
Which goes to the authorities.
Yes, it alerts law enforcement and financial intelligence units. The article also mentions risk-based controls becoming more important,
Meaning.
meaning institutions focus more monitoring effort on customers or types of transactions they consider higher risk for money laundering or structuring. It helps them react faster.
That proactive approach seems critical. Now, what if someone is caught doing this? What are the consequences?
The FinCrime intelligence piece is very clear. Structuring is a serious crime.
Not just a slap on the wrist.
Definitely not. They specifically mention the U.S., where federal law, like the Bank Secrecy Act, explicitly prohibits structuring to dodge those reporting rules.
And the penalties.
They can be severe. We're talking hefty fines, potentially losing the assets involved through forfeiture.
So the government can seize the money.
Yes, and potentially other assets too. And significantly, prison time is a real possibility.
Wow. But the article mentions intent is important, right? You have to prove they meant to avoid the reporting.
That's correct. Prosecutors generally need to show the person knew about the reporting requirements and deliberately structured the transactions to get around them. It's not just about making small deposits innocently.
But I imagine the pattern of transactions itself could be strong evidence of that intent.
Very often, yes. The pattern itself can be compelling circumstantial evidence. Now, it's also useful to see where structuring fits in the grand scheme of money laundering.
Right. It's usually just one part of a bigger process.
Exactly. The article explains this well. Structuring is very often the first step, what's called the placement stage.
Placement. Putting the money into the system.
Precisely. Getting the illicit cash into the financial system in the first place without immediate detection.
Yeah.
Those small, structured deposits are the entry point.
Okay, so the money is placed. What happens next?
Then comes the layering stage we touched on earlier. This involved moving the money around through more complex transactions.
Like.
Wire transfers, buying assets, converting currencies, moving funds between different accounts, maybe internationally. The goal here is to blur the trail back to the original crime.
Make it impossible to follow the money.
Right. Structuring is that crucial first door that lets the dirty money get into the house, so to speak, so that it can be layered.
And criminals probably don't just use structuring on its own.
Rarely. The article points out it's often combined with other tactics, things like shell companies.
Businesses that look real but don't actually do anything?
Exactly. Or using offshore bank accounts in places with weaker regulations. Even complex schemes involving international trade, known as trade-based money laundering. Structuring often greases the wheels for these bigger operations.
It sounds like a foundational technique then.
It often is. Which brings us to a really important point the article makes: the need for training and awareness.
Within the banks and financial institutions themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about the frontline staffs, the tellers, the customer service reps. They're often the first human point of contact.
So they need to be trained to spot the signs.
Yes. They need good training to recognize those subtle clues, those unusual transaction patterns that might indicate structuring.
And it can't be just a one-off training session, I guess.
No. The article emphasizes it needs to be regular, ongoing training. Criminal methods evolve, regional risks change, compliance teams need constant updates too.
So it's about building a strong internal culture against money laundering.
That's the idea. The article concludes that this heightened awareness, combined with better monitoring technology, is really key to improving detection and fighting financial crime overall.
Okay, let's quickly recap the main takeaways from this FinCrime intelligence deep dive. Structuring or smurfing.
It's that technique of breaking down large illegal sums into smaller transactions.
All to dodge those reporting thresholds and avoid detection.
Criminals use various tricks, multiple people, different locations, careful timing.
And banks are on the lookout for red flags like those constant near threshold deposits or weird transaction patterns using both people and tech.
Getting caught means serious trouble. Big fines, asset forfeiture, even jail time.
And remember, structuring is often that first crucial step, the placement in bigger money laundering schemes.
Which highlights why continuous training and awareness inside financial institutions are so vital.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? The sheer scale of financial crime out there.
Yeah, and how much of it relies on these methods like structuring that seem almost mundane but are incredibly effective at hiding illicit funds.
Yeah.
These groups are always adapting.
And that really leads us to a final thought for you to consider.
Yeah,
We're seeing constant evolution in financial technology, right?
absolutely. Crypto, instant payments, fintech platforms.
So, how is all that tech changing the game? How does it affect the ways criminals structure money and the tools authorities need to develop to catch them?
It's a constant cat and mouse game.
It really is something to keep exploring this whole world of financial crime and how we try to combat it. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.